therapist perception.
Bachelorette.
All right, it is Reactivity TV time, and this is a special segment of Reactivity TV because we are actually wrapped up with season 8 of Bachelor in Paradise, finally.
Yay.
And as we were discussing in our last Reactivity TV episode, we thought it could be cool to kind of look back on the season and really think about and talk about the major themes that we saw kind of get exposed throughout the season. Maybe we could think about some lessons that we learned about relationships as we kind of talk about these themes. But yeah, there were some kind of consistent topics and trends throughout the season.
Yes. And also to piggyback on the what can we learn? Like, maybe we can't learn a lot of direct lessons of what to do. But
maybe what not to do.
We can learn what not to do. And we also just learn a lot about how many relationships on and off this show function.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes not the best ways.
Yes, right. Functionally dysfunctional or dysfunctionally functional? No, the other one.
I like both of them. They both make sense.
So what was one of your kind of like main themes that you saw throughout the season as you looked back?
Okay. This played out throughout. I mean, from day one until the yes, I'll marry you, and probably even to the reunion. But we saw a lot of anxious attachments in this season. And this isn't novel to Bachelor in Paradise. We see it from Bachelor to Bachelorette to many other reality TV shows, because to be honest, that's where the juice and the drama lies, is when we're feeling like we're anxious and are insecure and worried about the other person and their feelings about us, and all caught up in that. That's where all the drama is. So it makes sense. But we saw that in so many different ways.
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, how did you spot it as an anxious attachment?
So like I said, it's like having an insecurity that's where you're worried about the other person that you're interested in, and you're worried about their interest in you. So we saw it time and time again happen with Genevieve. We saw it happen a lot with all of or not all of, but a chunk of the first group of women when they left the resort, went to the other one. We saw it when they were all thinking, oh, well, now they're not going to like me, or like, what am I, I'm doing so many different things and they're not going to like this, and they're going to forget about me. And it was just all so focused on the other person's feelings about them and just making up all of these assumptions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. Which will be a nice segue to my theme too. But it was really interesting to think about, because it almost seemed like there was a lack of object permanence. Do you know what that is? But, for people who don't know what that is, it's just this idea that it's sort of like if someone is not in front of you, you forget that they exist. And that's like, really, that's a part of like being a baby, right? Like if a baby's caregiver goes out of sight, they might get really overwhelmed and very distressed because they haven't yet integrated that just because they're out of sight doesn't mean they're not here anymore. But we almost saw that kind of, I guess I'm going to call it immaturity as it relates to dating and relationships with many of these women or within many of these relationships. And as you were saying, that idea of, oh, this person isn't spending time with me, that means like our relationship is on the rocks, or maybe they don't like me anymore. They're probably going to break up with me, or I should just go home now. All of that catastrophizing and overthinking was so evident. And that is such a marker of having an anxious attachment.
Yeah, absolutely. And it ends up, I mean, first of all, these people who were experiencing that were basing that off of one or two dates and take really just like putting all of their eggs in this one basket and not allowing the opportunity for anything else to happen. All of the eggs went into, this is over. They couldn't possibly, remember me and remember what we went through together in the 2 days that we were together. And instead of all the other opportunities for growth in their relationship and development, Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there was such, I don't know if it was quite codependent or quite enmeshed, but there were elements of that too, where it seemed like for many of the women, their emotional state, their sense of worth and security was fully based on someone else's engagement with them or interaction with them or the attention that they paid to them. And again, that is really common in an anxiously attached individual. And it was quite dramatic. I mean, it did make for quite a show, but it probably felt so uncomfortable for these women. As much as we talked about them each week, that's such an uncomfortable state to be in. The word anxious is in there. It's to be on that high key level anxiety for 3 weeks straight is a lot exhausting.
Right. And I don't know if it's just the nature of the journey of the show or what, but that kind of heightens things and makes things so much more intense. I don't know, but regardless, that does happen in real life dating, that sometimes people can latch on to somebody rather quickly, and in doing so will develop this idea and this worry that this other person isn't going to like them, or like will overthink and catastrophize every little thing that they do, and based on the other person's reactions or the other person's communication in general back to them.
Yes. Yeah. And maybe that's a good segue to one of my main themes that I saw, particularly at the beginning, like the beginning half of the season, was this strong tendency to overthink, to catastrophize. And again, that's not like uncommon. It's not even, what am I trying to say? I have a lot of empathy for why, again, particularly the women were often in a state of overthinking and catastrophizing. You just kind of called it out. It's a really intense environment. It's like condensed into a 3-week period of time. You are probably
not, 3?
It's only 3 weeks.
No, Amy.
Yes.
No.
Yes. Yeah.
I didn't know it was only 3.
It's only 3 weeks, which is why these dates feel so high stakes. And I know we kind of gave Jill a little bit of shit, for getting so invested in her relationship with Jacob, having that one date. But when it's one date or one day out of 21, or let's like be generous and say like 25, that is a lot. That's a huge chunk of time in that setting. And so again, the stakes feel high. It's intense. Add to it alcohol, probably lack of food, and water, and being dehydrated, having cameras on you all the time, like
proper nutrition.
Oh yeah, all of that out the window. And so you have the makings for just heightened anxiety to begin with. And so like their baseline level was already higher. And then maybe adding in whatever their own like personal stuff, their personal narratives that they might come into the show with, all have the makings for more quickly jumping to overthinking and catastrophizing. And so again, not unpredictable given the circumstances. And like people can tend to overthink and catastrophize off the beaches of paradise, you know, in everyday life. And what can be really helpful, and what we had kind of had felt like we wished these women did. And I'm saying particularly in this season, it was the women. It's not just women who overthink. I just want to be clear. Mm-hmm. But what we had kind of wished that they would do was to pause, take a step back, check the facts, be more grounded. Like these are actual skills that can help people when they're feeling so overwhelmed to the point where they were sidelined for several days, some of them a week, when they had kind of switched up the resorts, that they missed out on an entire week of an experience, of an opportunity, because their overthinking had kind of put them into a paralysis state. Had shut them down. And so that is one outcome of overthinking, but it doesn't need to be the only outcome. That you can kind of harness and have more ability to manage that overthinking tendency than it might feel like you do in the moment.
Ooh, that's great that you gave a suggestion and a few suggestions as to what to do when that happens, because you're right, it does happen outside of paradise. And there are ways to check in with yourself to keep yourself from going down that spiral, because it's not doing you any good.
Right. And we did see some cast members be very resourceful and try to like manage their anxiety. We saw Jacob doing meditation and breathing and things like that. We saw at one point when we had our anxiety episode, we talked about kind of knowing who to go to and who not to go to when you're anxious. And we did see some cast members really use their peers for a little bit of grounding, getting perspective. So we did see them be resourceful.
And we did see them lean on some people who just fueled it.
Yes.
Too.
Right.
Which
does not help.
No.
So yeah, the emotional regulation, or lack thereof, was such a theme throughout this season.
This goes along with just overthinking in general. But we saw a lot of this fight for me dialogue.
Yeah, fighting for the relationship, sweeping my feet.
Right. So, I mean, what I really want to say about that is how, when people are saying that, particularly on the show, that it seemed like what they wanted to communicate was, I want you to tell me that you just want me and nobody else, and only me forever. And now I'm thinking of like the Notebook line, you and me forever, after 1 or 2 days. And yes, I get the show is short, and now I know it's really 3 weeks. Wow. So it makes sense that these cast members are jumping to, okay, so we are together now, we're exclusive, and we're together, so now we must be exclusive, and this thing better keep happening until the very end. And yet it didn't really play by, in quotes, like play by the rules of how this kind of how the show is supposed to go. So they wanted this to happen. And yet that same person would then turn around and go and date somebody else if they walked down to the beach. And so it was very contradictory. It was very, it was very confusing and not fair. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Not fair to anybody's intentions coming into this, thinking I have many opportunities here to date you or you or you or you or you this day, and let me see how this person is doing the next day, because that's how this is kind of supposed to unfold. Let me see how let me see how this goes, and not, okay, I've stuck my eyes on you the first day and now we're mated for life like lobsters. Like, So we saw a lot of that. And I mean, my main takeaway with that is just how unfair that was, and confusing.
Yeah, I agree. And I had kind of a similar thought around that, like where it at times felt a little bit like a double standard. Like the people who were saying, fight for me, fight for this relationship, choose me, were asking that person to be vulnerable with them, but they weren't able to be vulnerable. They weren't able to be vulnerable first, yeah. or for them to be the one to say, I choose you, I want this relationship. They were only feeling like they could do that if the other person said it first or confirmed that. And that, again, speaks to insecurity and some anxious attachment stuff, but there was a little bit of
it's like a little temperature check. It's like, just like, tell me how you're feeling so I can then tell you how I'm feeling, or won't. I'll hold back too if you hold back.
Yes. Yeah. It's relying on someone else to confirm or deny your feelings. And that is not, that is not does vulnerability make, but it also is not honest in communication at all. And I think that also kind of leads me into, I guess, two things kind of going off that. One is the importance of communicating your needs in a relationship, and whether that's like, my love language is words of affirmation. And it's really important to me that a partner can be affirming of me, be communicative about their interest in me, or whatever, just be more forthcoming. Or for some, we saw like this fighting for me, like maybe that's like that, what that looks like for me. What I'm looking for in a partner is someone who will do X, Y, or Z.
Right.
So being able to be upfront with your needs, your expectations, your wants, and not like being very obscure about what it is, whatever quote unquote give me more is, or fight for this is, that doesn't give any information. And again, it's not vulnerable, and it doesn't, you have to set yourself up sometimes to take the loss, to get rejected in order to get the information that you want. And it felt like people were so scared to get rejected and get that information, because you could have saved yourself a lot of time, potentially found a different partner if you were just much more clear and upfront. This is what I want. This is what I'm looking for. This is a desirable partner to me. Is that you? Are you into that? I'm looking to date, to get married. Is that what you're here for? No, you just want to mess around and kind of date around. Okay, cool. Have fun. That's not what I'm here for. Let's move on. And there was just so much time wasted. And that happens in dating so much. I'm thinking about so many people that I've worked with who are telling me that they want a relationship, but what their actions are saying is, I just don't want to be rejected. And those two things, they cannot coexist. They really can't.
Well said.
I just ranted.
No, I mean, no, I don't even have anything to add. I think that was just such a great way to put out how how important it is to be direct so that you get what you want. You don't waste your own time.
Right. Well, and to do it in a way that is, I mean, as therapists, you love I statements, but to do it in a way that is about you. And I guess my like comma to my point was to be able to communicate your needs and expectations in a relationship without being critical of someone else. And we also saw that come through a lot. You're allowed, of course, to have needs and to have wants. And that doesn't mean that you, in communicating those, it doesn't mean that you need to down somebody else for not being able to be that person or meet those needs. It's simply enough to say, I'm looking for someone who makes me feel heard and makes me feel seen. I'm looking for someone who is stable in their life. I'm looking for someone who has the same financial goals as I do. Like, that's enough to say. You don't need to kind of double down on that and say, well, you're an Uber driver, and so that's not it for me, my guy, or whatever.
Right. Well, and also, I mean, I know that Jill said that in the van as she's driving away. Did Jacob know that? Mm-hmm. Did Jacob know that that was something that was important to you, that bothered you? Mm-hmm. Probably not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. And it's so unfair. And we might have talked about this, but I think I felt it was hard. It becomes unfair to your relationship present and your relationship future to have these expectations, these wants, these needs, and to keep them to yourself and yet still evaluate somebody based on those things. It's not fair. You're grading someone on an exam they didn't know they're taking. And so it can predict a lot more success if you are just more upfront with what you want and need. You deserve that. Why should you get what you want and need? And so not communicating that, while it's more comfortable maybe to not communicate that, it likely will not get you what you want.
Okay, we're going to highlight and like star, red circle, double bold, extra large font. You're grading somebody on a test they don't even know they're taking. Mm-hmm. I love that.
Yeah. Well, that's what it is.
Messed up.
It's not fair. It's not fair to either party.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, Bachelor.
God, my heart hurts. But yeah, I mean, so I know we said this at the beginning. I guess we learned a lot of what not to do in relationships, or what doesn't predict, what's not a good predictor of like a stable, secure feeling relationship. And the other thing I think this just occurred to me because you mentioned like post-season stuff, finale stuff. The other thing that we learned is that while many of these relationships could exist on the beaches of paradise, while it was demanding in one way, it didn't have the trappings of real life, of work, of family, of financial responsibilities, any of that stuff. And so once like the reality hit, it's hard to have a relationship when you have life too. And so we saw a lot of relationships just not be able to survive that. And I think that just speaks to how challenging relationships really can be, and how important it is to try to find somebody that you're compatible with across many spheres of your life. That
does wrap us up on our takeaways from season 8 of Bachelor in Paradise. But we're going to come back with more. Just because the season's over, it doesn't mean we have more. Doesn't mean we don't have more to say. And there is lots happening. Plus, we did say in our last week's Reactivity TV that we would love listener input on other shows that we should talk about. Honestly, reality or not, we are open to breaking them down, giving our therapist perspective on all of the things in all of the relationships and all of the shows. So tell us.
Yes. Yeah. Let us know what you're watching. We'll watch it too. And then, of course, Bachelor wise, we'll be back at the end of January to react to Zach's season of The Bachelor. But yeah, until then, I guess we'll see what else we've got going on.
Yeah, cool.